Welcome to the Make It Happen podcast, where we talk to cool people doing cool things. We're here at Toledo Tech Loft today, and want to thank the creator and producer of Make It Happen, Mike Vanderpool. I'm Vince Croce, his special projects co-host, and our cool person today is Tom Bush. And why is he cool? Because he is got the hottest startup in Northwest Ohio in the Toledo area right now. First off, Tom, can you tell us a little bit about why'd you have a startup here in Toledo?
Yeah. Actual Reality Technologies. If you want to say it's the coolest startup, I'm happy with that. And I'm also happy that you didn't say cool. We talked to cool people and this guy named Tom Bush. So thank you for that as well. Actual Reality Technologies, we launched it 2 years ago here in Northwest Ohio. And, at the time, because I was new to doing a startup, I came from, a corporate guy for 30, 40 years and decided I wanted to try to do something that both had purpose for our community and a way to help retain some of our tech talent. And so if we could create a cool AI startup here in town, our tech folk would rally around that, and that's happened. So we are helping manufacturers and businesses embrace AI. We also saw AI as a differentiator for people and help accelerate individuals in their journey and their careers. So we actually launched Empowered AI, which is a nonprofit startup. And we've been partnering with a bunch of education and adult workforce development type activities around the community, trying to infuse them with AI so everybody can be taking advantage of this moment in time.
Well, Tom, that's something you could have done arguably anywhere in the country and even other places right here in Ohio. What brought you to Toledo, and why did you think, hey, this is where I want to do a startup, and why anybody else would want to do it?
Yeah, I think Toledo's a little bit of an undiscovered gem. A lot of the stories of individuals like myself, we grew up in the area. I grew up in Tecumseh, Michigan. Shout out to the Indians out there. And that's just over the border here in Michigan, and always would come to Toledo for shopping and whatnot. But you move away, and then at some point, some sort of family story emerges, and you come back. And so that is a very common story here in Toledo, that people will move away, they'll advance their careers, and then they come back to this region because either they enjoyed the way they grew up and want that for their kids, or they have family in the area and they just wanted to be closer. So that's kind of the origin of how we came back to the area. And then, the startup aspect of what I was doing was more of identifying a need in the community where our area is known for manufacturing. But the reality is we have 100+ software companies in this region, and there's a lot of tech going on. It's just we don't talk about it. And so Toledo does have a little bit of a deficiency in telling its own story in a positive light with the fact that there is advancing technology. There is a startup community. There is a bunch of activities. And so that tells me that, number one, we need to tell better stories. And number two, some of this we need to put a little bit of energy and steroid action into. And so that's kind of why I've been on the scene trying to help get startups going, get excitement, show the world that the tech community is here, gather the tech community on second and fourth Tuesdays, Tech Night at Toll House. We come together and we have good conversations. Toledo Codes, which was started by Justin Beaudry to try to bring a bunch of meetup groups together. So, we are creating this kind of groundswell of activity to try to really just put us on the map. In November, we, as I was on the podcast the last time talking about Great Lakes AI Week, that was both for our community and a little bit of PR, trying to just create a publicity stunt that we could host the largest AI conference in the Midwest right here in our community. And so we pulled that off. And so I think that sent a message, and it's still reverberating. I got news just the other day that Columbus, somebody was talking to the president of Ohio State University and made mention of the fact, oh yeah, I heard that up in Toledo, they did that Great Lakes AI thing and it was huge. Yeah. So, and University of Cincinnati has been talking about it too. So yeah, the news, it's still kind of reverberating. Oh my gosh, Toledo has stepped onto the scene for technology. And so, yeah, I think that's where, as you can see, I'm excited about having that rolling and just making it, grow and grow and grow.
Are you looking for the perfect spot to bring your team together and spark new ideas? At the Toledo Tech Loft, they have exactly what you need. They offer 3 well-equipped conference rooms that are perfect for your business meetings and collaborative sessions. The meeting spaces are designed to help your team connect and create in a comfortable, inspiring environment. And when it's time for a larger gathering, step into their workshop room, bathed in natural light from big windows and filled with a fantastic vibe. It's the ideal space for hosting networking events, workshops, and all those things that help you and your organization make it happen. Plus, nestled in the heart of downtown, you'll be surrounded by great restaurants, great scenery, and the vibrant energy the city has to offer. Come see how the Toledo Tech Loft can be your next home base.
Tom, first, thank you for bringing your startup here and having involvement with all those other things. That Great Lakes AI Week was phenomenal. Look forward to that coming back this way. You mentioned the word story in there and getting that story out. And two places where I think that needs to be heard is we hear about the brain drain. So how do we do the brain retain and keep those students and young people in the area here? And the other part is that boomerang effect sometimes, families coming back, and that may be what brought you back here, but how do we get people to come back here or come here from somewhere else? What story and how do we tell that to them to get them to come to Toledo?
Yeah. And it comes down to, like, I think a lot of the energy needs to be around jobs, right? I was shocked when I went to talk to a bunch of college kids. And, I had just come off, while I was working remote with Amazon, my brain was in Seattle. I was working and living here. It was intriguing when I went to the university and found out when I talked to the students that they said, well, we would happily stay here. Like I said, well, you can make more money on the coast. And they were already aware of the fact that if you live on the coast and you make that big salary, that you're also paying out that big salary for cost of living. And so the mathematics is already known in the students. So they would love to stay here. Now it's just a question of how do we connect them up to jobs? How do we make sure that we're growing jobs that they want? And when I said to them 2 years ago, I said, hey, I'm starting up an AI company. The computer science students were just elated because they're like, oh my gosh, an AI company in Toledo? Because even they're not aware of the many software companies that are around our region that they could be interning at and whatnot. Because those software companies that exist, if you go to toldir.com, TOLDIR.com, you'll find a list of all of these tech companies and other tech adjacent things. And the problem is that those companies are servicing people outside of Toledo. So we don't do a good job of procuring from ourselves. Our bigger companies would rather work with a big national brand than, a local company. And I think that's changing. The more we talk to them, the more we show off the capability of what our smaller local companies can do. Those bigger brands will start procuring services from them. And they really, once you share with them the story of, hey, spend $1 with me, it gets spent 4 more times in our community before it goes outside the community. People get that. And people who live here understand that and want that. And so I think it's really kind of for us startups to step up to the plate, make sure it's known, make sure we're doing high quality things. And then the bigger companies will start using us if we're servicing something they need.
Okay. So it sounds like the talent pool is here. There's enough people that could do the work. The work is here. There's companies that have a need for advanced technology, AI, things like that. It's just a matter of it's getting farmed out, and then that's also taking the kids out, the students out to a degree where everything's potentially here. It's just got to be pooled together.
Potential is probably the best term there. Yeah, there's potential here for sure. There's not enough tech activity going on. And so you're right. If we can get more insourcing to our community, there's more tech opportunity. That definitely helps. That's why this year, a bunch of us are focused on startup energy, because the more startups there are, the more employment there is. And so that's super important. And so how do we light a fire under people to bring their use cases? Like, I have an idea, let's go, let's make that idea happen. And so I think that's where I see the mathematics I'm trying to work out is, yes, create a bunch of internal insourcing. Yes, we already have a bunch of software companies that have figured out how to get national cash. Well, how do we get them to employ more locally? Because a lot of them are also doing remote work. Because I'm so Northwest Ohio focused right now, 100% of my employees report here in Northwest Ohio. I had a bunch of people from Ann Arbor wanting to remote work for me. And I said, well, if you're willing to move to Northwest Ohio, you're in. Okay. But if you're not, that's part of what we're trying to do. And so it's so easy for a software company to outsource to India. And I'll say this, I think we have an opportunity in our region, specifically around tech, to kind of be a low-cost region for tech, and because we're not paying the California salaries. And so that gives a cost advantage of tech happening from this region. So,
Well, somebody else we talked to recently, Darren Moore, he had an article in the Toledo Blade op-ed talking about, hey, we've got to reinvigorate Toledo and business and all that. And he was talking about money going out of Toledo. There's a lot of investment going other places because they don't see it here. You see the potential here and a lot of value. How do we connect that potential investments that are here and the potential for jobs? And
yeah, it's a little bit of chicken and egg, and so like often when you're talking to people who maybe have some cash to do some investment, they're going to quickly jump to there's not deal flow here in Toledo. And what that means in layman's terms is there's not enough ideas that we think are worth investing in. And so I think that's one call to action for us as a community is to, create those startups, get those ideas out, start pulling that. But they won't show up until there's deal flow. And the chicken and egg part of it is deal flow may not show up until there's a realization that there's money available to actually help me once I have an idea. And so you kind of have to time it. It almost has to be a moment where it both happens simultaneously. We've organized the finance aspects of what we want to do, and we're able to allocate some of that to high risk stuff. Because that's the other thing is, as Midwesterners, we don't want to take on a lot of risk. Startups are inherently risky. And we as a community need to be excited about that risk because we love that energy, because that's what the adrenaline aspect of starting a company is awesome. If you have backing. And I think that's where the money has to show up. So yeah, it's a chicken and egg issue we've got right now here in Northwest Ohio, is that we can retain a bunch of the brain drain of the colleges graduating these kids if we have a bunch of jobs. We can have a bunch of jobs if we have a plethora of startups. And we can have a plethora of startups if they have backing, which means we need local VC or whatever. And we can get local VC if we have a bunch of startups and if we have a lot of people to fill the jobs of those startups. So, I mean, you can see how it flows back. Okay. It's a system that has to work together.
Right. And Tom, I've seen you present that in other forums. If you look at just from the tech side, that's your area of expertise. You've done a startup, and you could assume that perfect alignment will happen. What do you think the tech side could do or should be doing or to put everything in place so that the investment side could merge together?
Well, I think a call to action to our community is figure out what idea you're coming to. Like any hobby you have, any sort of problem you're seeing is a potential product. And, just to give a hint and a way to think about it, there's a guy named Scott Galloway who's New York NYU professor in marketing. And he's done these predict the year ahead kind of things. And when I was starting up, there was all of this like serendipitous opportunity, things kept coming together. And he was one of the things that came into my YouTube channel. And I saw him say this: what I think is going to sell in 2025 are time machines. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. What does he mean? And so he went on to explain, if you can save people time, that's worth something. And if you can build an app that saves somebody time, that's a time machine. Like you have given time back to them. And so I immediately registered the domain name ibuildtimemachines.com. And that kind of helped focus my energy. And I kind of took that one concept and said, oh, I want to be a time machine builder. And that's what I'm thinking about. As I was already kind of on the way with AI, I was like, yeah, that helps put it in place. I'm going to be saving people time. I'm building time machines. Like that's what we got. And so I think it's these little nuggets of inspiration and what can you do with that? And I think that's where if you have a nugget of inspiration, we had this two tech nights ago. Somebody showed up who was just thinking about this idea, and they were brave enough to get up on a stage and say, I'm thinking about this idea. I'd like to talk about this tonight. Anybody else interested in this idea? Come talk to me. I was like, that's awesome. And so suddenly there was a group of, 5 or 10 people swarming around talking about this idea. And so hopefully that gets legs and gets moving, and realizing that one of the first challenges they're going to have is, where do we convene? Because you kind of need a place. You have to have a place you call home. And so the Tech Loft is a great opportunity for that. And how do I find like-minded individuals? Well, you come to those networking events, you get involved in the community, and you start building that group around you. And then once you get a little bit, it's about who's my first customer. And that's where the networking and kind of coming into it. And that's what actually is one of Northwest Ohio's greatest strengths, finding that first customer. My success was built because I met somebody who knew somebody who got me into a company that then started paying me for my services. And that's how I funded my startup. Interpeak AI, another success story here. They're an AI startup that claims Toledo as home, even though the incubator that picked them up, I think, is in New York. So they spend time in or wherever they're at, somewhere outside of Northwest Ohio. But who was their first customer? It was a couple of local schools. They're building on mental health for school-age kids. And it was a couple of Toledo-based local schools that said, we'll take a risk with you. We'll jump in with you. And you have the same with another AI startup that recently sold. And its strength was it had met he met somebody who connected him with somebody who then got his first customer. And so I think that's really why I got on the news a while back and said, this is the most welcoming startup community, because within 2 or 3 conversations, you can actually get connected to your first customer. And so I think that's where, and that's your validation. Am I walking down an idea that has legs? And if you can, in Northwest Ohio, since everybody is very willing to have a first customer, kind of this first customer experience, you can really test your market really locally and quickly.
So it sounds like it starts with an idea.
Absolutely.
You mentioned some ways that some ideas came out on your own and at a tech night. Would there be any way of creating a clearinghouse to get more of those ideas coming up and more people hearing about? It sounds like the customers are there. It sounds like the workers are there. It sounds like the potential for business and investors are there. How do we get more of these ideas? How do we plant more seeds?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know there are a couple groups trying to figure that out. Because there's a flip of this model that's interesting. NOIC, the Northwest Ohio Innovation Consortium, they're a collaboration across the glass companies in our region, and they were identified as a tech hub by the state, which was awesome. They're actually queuing up problem statements saying, hey, in the glass industry, we have this kind of problem, we have this kind of problem, we have this kind of problem. And so they're doing what I want our big companies to do and our universities, which is, hey, Northwest Ohio, we have this kind of issue. Anybody want to tackle it? It's a potential for a first customer. And I've talked to our universities for the same idea of rather than using a third-party consultant from outside, why don't you take whatever your need is if you can't find somebody immediately and hold it out to the community and say, hey, here's a need. If somebody wants to create a startup to satisfy that need, it's a first customer potential. And I think that's really what all of us startups need, right, is a first customer.
Okay. So maybe isn't starting necessarily with an idea. It's starting with the problem or the need
100%.
And harvesting those.
Yep.
That's the real seeds. What needs to be fixed. Oh, I think I can fix that. And then.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's where the UT Business Incubator that's here that provides support to startups and has space that you can rent. A lot of their clientele is the university. And so they're helping source those seeds of ideas from the professors and trying to encourage the professors to become startup guys and gals and put some energy behind them. So we have groups, the Small Business Association, in the basement of the public library, there's actually a small business situation where these groups will help you get connected with funding, or they are also very well connected in the community and can help source some first customer opportunities, stuff like that. So we have pieces of the puzzle. There's definitely things afoot to try to pull those pieces together. There is a group that started last year called The Beat, which is pulling together a bunch of these groups that cater to startups and trying to get them to coordinate as a unit. So when somebody shows up on the team, they know how to triage and say, oh, well, you're doing that kind of startup. Go over there, and oh, you're doing this kind of startup, like over here is a better starting point for you. So the Beat is emerging and will become a thing. And so there is energy afoot to try to make these things happen, but it's moving, to my taste, a little too slow.
Okay.
There's often when we finally get government entities talking about, oh yeah, we should do something in this space, they'll say, let's have conversation about it. And what they don't realize is we've been having conversations about it, and we're kind of ready for somebody to step up with some cash, because you can only talk about it so long. Eventually it does come down to an investment is required to create X. And we have some really cool assets here, like the Toledo Tech Loft, and Dave Ball did a big investment in this space to try to make it cool, to make people want to be here. And I started the nonprofit and started pulling together. That's another spark of energy. And really, to turn all these sparks into flames, we just need a little more fuel, I think.
Okay, so that's the hindrance or the blockade right now, is that fuel. The sparks are there. There's a pile of wood ready to go. Just needs a little more
Yeah, exactly.
energy to get it going.
To make it happen.
Wow, that's a deep thought right there. Somebody should come up with a podcast
That's right.
like that. Tom, something Darren mentioned when we talked to him is a 24-month shot clock, saying we've got this window of time where things really need to happen if we want to make a change. I don't like to use the term magic wand necessarily, but if you were the commissioner, you had all control, what would you see need to be done in that 24-month period, especially from the startup side?
Yeah. So for, the interesting thing, shot clock, so basketball, to an untrained observer, oftentimes when you see the players on the court, they look like they're moving about randomly, right? And it's just like one guy's covering another guy, and wherever that guy goes, he goes. And you often you hear, if you've watched a game, you'll hear a coach yell out a play. And so that's weird to me because I'm not that good. I don't know basketball that well. But when I hear the play call and I see the players put up a hand, signal of some sort, and they're doing something, to me, it still looks random, but they're coordinated in some way, right? And so that's, we're kind of in a phase right now where I think we have some coordinated elements, but it's kind of random, and we're kind of we're blocking and tackling. I switched analogies there. So we're we're picking and rolling on the situations here, kind of as people show up. So like I'm picking and rolling and doing my little, I'm trying to get to the hoop, and we got some people over there trying to get to the hoop. And, I think maybe what was being said with the, you got a shot clock going. If you notice, when a shot clock situation is happening, when they're down to the last seconds of the game, they actually start to line up in lines, right? And they start running circles or whatever. And clearly there's a play. Like clearly they practice that. You can see it. Any observer can see that. And I think that's the phase we need to get into right now, is that we need to coordinate into a unit play rather than everybody kind of doing their own piece. And I think that's where we will probably have a little bit of growth pain and, some struggling because, people get used to having their court and they think this is their game. And someone over here thinks it's their game. And we're not often enough talking about our game, right, as a team. And, the other piece is these situations that we find ourselves in Northwest Ohio have occurred elsewhere. And I know our community has gone out and studied those elsewheres. It just feels like when we study those elsewheres and we come to say, oh, they had a good thing going, we don't necessarily come back and say, let's replicate that in a coherent way. And I was fortunate to spend 10 years in Grand Rapids, Michigan, watch that go from a place nobody wants to be downtown to everybody wants to be downtown. Then I moved to just happenstance, moved to Cincinnati. And the 5 years I was there, same transition. Nobody wants to be downtown to everybody wants to be downtown. And, I think it is time for downtown Toledo to have that moment where people are tending to only come down for their thing and then leave versus people come to just see what's going on and want to be part of the energy. And so I think that's where when we start to work as a unit, we can start to say, as a group, even those who are in Perrysburg and Sylvania, yes, we want our downtown area to be a place where we go, where we hang out, where we start to concentrate some business energy, because the world knows us as Toledo. If you're in Perrysburg, your moniker is Toledo. If you're in Sylvania, your moniker is Toledo. We are Toledo. And I think that's a piece of the puzzle that we all need to be collaborating and coordinating for. And while there are, mommy issues and Sylvania issues and Genoa issues, like, yes, everybody's got their local stuff going on. There does need to be some energy paid to the center. And I think that's where, if we come together as a group, start to strategize into our court, last seconds play, the shot clock is happening, like we got to get some wins, because right now is the opportunity. You got emergent technology that creates a great opportunity for our community. We've got onshoring, which creates a great opportunity for our community. And so you've got all of these things afoot that, if we can capitalize, could really turn the tides to our population loss, to all of the kind of situations that are creating more challenges for us as we try to build. So.
Yeah. Sounds like we have the players and the talent. We're on the court. We can compete with the Cincinnatis, the Grand Rapids. We're similar sized cities or replicable, as you put it. Is it a coaching issue? Do we need a coach? Is there a coach? Who's got to call the plays if we have it? It sounds like we have everything we need, but we're not running the play.
Yeah, we definitely have the parts. Can we compete with the Grand Rapids and the Cincinnati? I would say not yet, because while they have things to tout, the interesting thing of Cincinnati would say, we are the smallest big city that has all of the amenities that you would want. And when they list them, like, we have opera, we have a zoo, we're a world-class zoo, we have this, we have that orchestra, and you could do. I'm like, no, are you sure you get that claim? Because Toledo, we're slightly smaller, and we have opera, we have a world-class zoo, we have the Metro Park situation, we have a bunch of great things that bigger cities have. And you add that to the lower cost of living, and it should be a perfect storm. And so I think do we need a central community plan? Absolutely. I think we should be talking and trying to create that unit play. Does that mean we need a coach, one person at the front? Possibly. I think what I've been using as my North Star, because there's not really anybody you can ask, what should I do in order to improve my community? It kind of has to come from within. And I've been using this website called MidwestStartups.com. And so if you go out there, the reason I'm using it is because they actually took an attempt at quantifying the problems, right? So they list all of the Midwest cities, at least the bigger ones. And so in that listing, Toledo is the moniker. They say we include Sylvania and Maumee, but Toledo is what they say. Toledo's ranked 39th. And I think the important part, I'm using it to say, okay, personal challenge / community challenge. How do we get from 39th to at least be in the top 10, maybe top 15? And so that's why I see one of our first weaknesses, we do not have venture capital and angel investment. That's definitely pops out right away. In fact, as I was doing analysis of the numbers and, talking to ChatGPT about it, ChatGPT said, if you can fix one thing, fix that. Number 2 is the volume of startups. So you need to really start cranking on that. So that's why I'm trying to get everybody excited about, let's do 200 startups that are curated and kind of, that we put our arms around and try to make sure they're successful this year in 2026. So that when they come back, Midwest, startups.com, and comes back and rates us, they can see we have startup energy, we have local investment opportunity, because we do rank pretty well on certain things. Another area that I would like to, think about is just like education. So unfortunately, we are not a highly educated populace. We actually rank pretty low on that of how many people in our community have bachelor's degrees. Not that that's a true measure of people's capabilities and talents, but it is a moniker people can look up. And so I think that's a piece of the puzzle that I'd like to see us take some swings at too. And I know our universities, UT, BGSU, Owens Community College, like everybody at Owens Community College last year, launched a new bachelor's degree, which creates new opportunity, which, creates pathways. And I think that's a piece of the puzzle we can come together and talk to for our community. What are our pathways to help people get not only educated, but it landed in a great job?
So VC fund, startups, education. Start with the VC fund. If you had a bunch of representatives from investment businesses, family, what do they call it? Family banks or family offices.
Yeah.
That's the big word I was looking for. Those people that have the money, how would you sell them or approach them let's get the money on the table? Here's now, we may not be where you would exactly like us to be at, but you have confidence that they could still bring it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not that versed in that space. So my desired ask is, I think we have an opportunity to create some energy, get people excited. I think, but first, they're going to be saying, okay, if we're going to come together as a group, VC, angel, whichever form it takes, they're going to say, find us some safe investments. Like I want to put my money in and I want it to be like a bank where I get my money back out eventually. While I think we should definitely keep a portion of that fund being in that fashion, I think that there's an opportunity to take 10% of the fund or, some percentage and say, no, this is allocated for 100% high risk. Like this is our risk dollars. That's what we need. We kind of need that fuel in the fire to really ignite people and get people excited. And that energy requires cash. And so if we only have people who are willing to come together to create safe investments, that creates a problem for us because as a startup community, a high schooler who's got some momentum, how do we put some energy there? Well, a standard investor is going to say that's not investable. But we're like, hey, that 10,000 this, it's 10,000 this year. We can see clearly how he's going to get to 50,000, how he gets to 100,000 in 2 years. Once he's 100,000, he can start hiring people, grow to 200. Like we can see that in somebody, but often it's hard to convince, a Midwestern investor to take that kind of risk.
So it takes some hard selling to get that Midwestern mentality to go into the Silicon Valley investment.
I mean, that's possible. We haven't, I have not stepped into that space to try it yet. That's my hypothesis of what I'm going to run into.
Okay. Well, and again, Tom, one of the reasons I think your vision has to get out there and your word is because you do have that inspiration. You can lay it out. And I think that's what could change some people's investment philosophy. It's like, yeah, they're safe, but this is what I want to. I want to invest in Toledo. I want to invest in the talent here. I want to make a difference. And I think that's the story I hear. Going to that second category, the startups, how do you really get that going? Get those people to throw the problems, the needs out, the people with ideas. How do we get more of that flowing?
Yeah, I think we just have to create the space for it. So, unfortunately right now, a lot of the activity around startups, you as the startup entrepreneur have to go through the doors of an organization. So like if you want help from that group that's in the basement of the library on small business, you have to know that they're there and you have to take time and go down there and so I think there's an opportunity maybe to actually get people outside of the doors, the support groups, and actually get them in the field, actually pushing people. For example, like I'm currently located in Perrysburg. There should be somebody around that's pressuring me to move to downtown. Like, hey, you're a tech company. We love you. We think you care about Toledo. Why aren't you downtown yet? And so somebody should be pulling on me saying, hey, we think, here's some office space here. Let's take you on a tour so you can see what it could look like being down here. And I don't know that there's anybody doing that. There's nobody out there kind of outside of their office proactively trying to recruit people to come in and say, hey, are you aware that there's this tax incentive? Toledo has an opportunity because it's, I forget the terms, but it's a region that the state has recognized they want to invest in. So if you're in a certain range of downtown, there's actually tax incentive, or if you're bidding for state contracts, they give you a preference and stuff like that. And so and does everybody know that? Why did you locate just outside the city limits when you're just over here, you get this benefit? And so I think there is some coaching or somebody out there who's instigating to try to create and centralize some energy. I think that would help a lot. Back to the investment thing. I think one of the pieces for Toledo is we have to find the people with heart for Toledo first, because that's what's going to kick it off. And I think once we have a little bit of that, like, I love Toledo enough to put some energy in, even though it may be a loss, we just need a little bit of that to get the ball rolling. And then once the ball's rolling, then some of the more standard folks can show up who maybe they're investing for investments purpose versus the heart for, the love for Toledo purpose.
So some outreach to the startup community,
Absolutely.
Some invitation, come on down, and then some outreach to the investment community. Hey, I'm asking you to take more of a risk. But
Yeah.
Look, I've brought these people down. We're reinvigorating Toledo. You can help on that mission. The last category you talked about was the education. What kind of model, or how do you see that flourishing or getting better than it is right now?
Well, first, we've been working hard through the nonprofit side to get AI infused everywhere, because AI is an accelerant to the learner. And I know tradition teachers are going to say, oh, it's cheating, right? And we're still in the age where we're fighting past that. And I remember back in the, early 2000s when we were fighting the internet entering the classroom, and teachers would say, you go to Wikipedia, you're going to cheat. And we've gotten past that. Nobody even thinks about that anymore. Kids are on the internet all day during class, and nobody's talking about plagiarism from Wikipedia anymore. Now we're talking about plagiarism from ChatGPT. But the value of an AI participating with a student in the class is innumerable, because you don't have to bother the teacher every time you have what you think is a silly question. So you can go home or in the class, you can have this dialogue with an AI to say, I didn't quite understand that concept. Can you explain it to me? I still don't get it, man. Could you explain it to me like I'm a fifth grader? I'm sorry, man. I still don't understand. Can you, well, now that you mentioned that term, I don't understand that. And you can kind of navigate and expand your learning without having to have the teacher be interrupted, right? And so it becomes very personalized, and you're filling the gaps of your knowledge with this interaction. And that's what is really the accelerant that puts fuel on this thing. So we've got Young Empowered Authors, which is a program our nonprofit does, where we're trying to demonstrate to the education systems that if you put the problem first, and this idea has been around forever, but AI allows it to like get on, accelerate, it's problem-based learning. You put the problem first. Now the students have a reason, because they need to solve that problem. They have a reason to learn XYZ topic. And so Young Empowered Authors is really this spark moment where we try to accelerate the student to creating a book that's publishable, so that they get the pride of being an author, so that they start to identify as an author, so that they take ownership of their literacy and their writing. In the short period of time we interact with them, we're never going to teach them to read and write better, but by sparking their excitement and getting them interested, it puts them on the path there. And the reason we're doing that is to demonstrate to K-12, this is an example of how it works. And look at our students and how they've grown to be successful. Look at how it sparked this entrepreneurial thing. Kids are going around doing book signings on their own, and some of our kids have sold 500 books, and it's really amazing. So I think our education system, the faster we adopt to AI, the state has even published K-12 guidance on how to adopt AI. So, our regulatory, the state regulates how the schools are supposed to work. The state has come out and said, do it. Right. And so there is permission granted. And so I think it's just really us accelerating to ask that. And as parents, we need to be asking our schools to do it. I was talking to one school district, and the superintendent said to me, I'm shocked that my parents are not asking me to be teaching this in classrooms yet. And that was last year. And so I don't know if he's being bothered now, but it's like all of the parents should be asking their superintendents, why isn't my kid talking about AI when they come home? Why aren't they on fire for this? Because it is the world they're going to grow into, even more so. And so I think that's where, the time is now, and that's probably back on the shot clock. Now is the time. And so it's not only for our economic development, but also for our population development and our children's development. The shot clock is happening. The urgency needs to be felt right now.
Excellent. A word I heard you use multiple times during this conversation is spark. Sparking ideas, sparking startups, sparking investment, sparking education, getting everything going. So kind of bringing that all together, if on Monday you could do one thing to add fuel to those sparks, you had no restrictions, no barriers, and you just said, we're going for it. We're going to find out what'll happen.
If it was truly 100% risk-free, it was interesting when I was on this startup journey, several of the individuals that were coaching me along the way, they would say things like, hey, that nonprofit thing, love the heart of that, but you should really drop that, because if you focus on the software company and make it 100-person software company, we can do a lot of development around that. What they mean by that is, if you can be a 100-person software company in Toledo, Ohio, from an economic development perspective, we can point at that and say, look, there's a software company surviving in Toledo. It's 100 people. It's massive and whatever. So it was interesting when they were saying, you should focus on that. So I guess selfishly, there is a play to say, I need to grow actual reality technologies to be a 100-person software company so that I can help my community tell a story that tech is happening here, because it shows a mass of energy. It also creates those jobs of the kids that are leaving. We graduate 600 to 800 computer science students every year from our universities, and maybe 50 of them stick around, right? And so it's like, if I can create a bigger software company, I can help the community in that way. I would love somebody to step up to the plate and organize venture capital and angel investment. So I don't have time because I'm trying to grow 100%, but that would be my second, like, let's go do that. And so that we can show 2 years ago, it was interesting. The governor, had, I think it was $89 million. And he said, I want to invest in my startups. So all the venture capital groups around the state. And I went to our people and said, where is that going to go? And they said, well, Jumpstart in Cleveland will take care of that for us. And I was like, well, that's not good. Like, we need someone here who can raise their hand. So my hope is that the next time a governor says, hey, I want to invest in the startups, the venture capitals, I'm going to infuse this cash, that we end up with somebody here in Toledo, some group that can raise its hand and say, yeah, we do that for Northwest Ohio. And that cash lands here, because of just the probability that it gets used here is so much greater, right? So I think that's a piece. The last piece, I would love for somebody to emerge in our community that's focused on startup energy, is organizing startup weekends. There is groups that we can try to get some sponsorship and grant money to bring in, national groups that facilitate this kind of hackathon scenario on a weekend, and do 3 of those this year. That would be awesome. So anybody out there who wants to volunteer for that, like, come on, let's reach out. I'll help you. I'm happy to sponsor some of it. But like I said, I've got my team, Actual Reality Technologies. I do need to help that business grow to become a piece of the puzzle. We got the nonprofit piece we're working on. So yeah, if I had my druthers, that's the things that would happen immediately. Somebody would emerge to do angel investing and venture capital. Somebody would emerge to really push on startups and get that energy moving, so that we know where do we convene, and where do we host these things. All that stuff is solvable, and we're ready for it. And then I'll keep trying to grow my company.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Tom, something both you and Darren in our previous podcast brought up was big wins, because big wins help you sell to create more wins. So I appreciate everything you're doing to create your big win with Actual Reality Technologies, going beyond that with the empowered AI to get the population learning and educated, and then your vision to what the future could look like and what needs to be involved, and calling out those action items, because I think that's what we need. So I think you've all seen why Tom is a cool person doing cool things, and he's really making it happen here in the Toledo area. And hopefully some of you out there will take those action items and give him a call and say, I'll take the reins on that one, Tom. Thank you.